Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Monday, May 19th, 2025. This is episode 391, How to Be a Respected Teacher. It's kind of like parenting. Anyway, there's a lot of things going on in the news, waiting for all of the news to sink in. But you probably heard that Moody's, which is a credit rating service primarily focused on U.S. Treasuries, I guess, they downgraded the credit rating of U.S. Treasuries. That is the money that the United States borrowed. And it's kind of weird thinking of it that way. But other countries, when they buy treasuries, they are lending the United States money, and the United States promises to pay them back a certain amount of interest. The problem is that the AAA rating uh, used to be held by U.S. Treasuries as measured by three uh, rating agencies, Fitch, S&P, and now Moody's, and all three now have downgraded treasuries. S&P did it in 2011. I remember that. Talked about it in class. They were punished. I'm pretty sure it was like Obama that tried to punish S&P because of that, right? Yeah. And Fitch, when they did it, it was at the tail end of Cervasis, and so maybe not a lot of people were paying attention. But basically, it's the ability of the country to pay back all of these loans. And people always say, oh, well, we can print money, and so of course we can pay it back. Well, see, that's the problem, right? Um, the value of those treasuries are going down. And this will probably trigger lots of different problems. For example, people who need to hold collateral, it can only be AAA rated securities. And if the United States loses that, then a lot of people have to start dumping treasuries unless they change those laws, regulations, requirements. But this is clearly a problem. And when all the ratings agencies downgrade US treasuries, other people, of course, are seeing it, they're noticing, and they're making moves. This is why the BRICS, I haven't talked about it in a while, but that's why BRICS is still plugging along, improving its infrastructure, going about its business because, this ship, the good ship dollar, is sinking. Anyway, so I was thinking today, for some reason, all of the kids at the end in my middle school, they sort of congregate in my room. I don't even really talk to them. I don't even really acknowledge them. But I just thought that I remember as a younger person when people would congregate that way, it was because they either liked the teacher, respected the teacher, or they knew the teacher wouldn't make a big deal for them to be there. And so I was thinking like, huh, how did I become that guy? Uh, And, I was thinking my father was a teacher and a professor. He was an English teacher in Korea, a very feared teacher. He taught there, I guess, 6 or 7 years while he was waiting to come to the United States. And then when he was here in the United States, uh, while he was doing his PhD, and then after he got his PhD, he taught in various universities around the city. And of course, I taught for a very long time, in and out, not only in churches, but also in a high school level when I was still a college student. So if I refigure my teaching internship, 1986 to now, that's about like 39 years. So I've been around the block. I've been despised. I've been, you know, beloved, shall we say, but also highly rated, right? So it wasn't that I was skimping out on the education for the students. And now one of my kids is now going to be a teacher, at least for now. And he seems to have the gift of teaching as well, being liked by colleagues and students. and still teaching the material. So I started thinking, what makes a good teacher? And there is a lot of subjectivity when one tries to answer that question, not only in the evaluation of what a good teacher is, but also by the people who are looking at the teacher, right? So, oh, excuse me, the teacher himself, him or herself, and also the people perceiving that teacher. Is it a person who has very rigid standards, rigid expectation of what makes a good teacher or not, that kind of thing. And also from a student's perspective, what are they hoping for? What are they getting? Uh, let's lay some ground rules, right? And this is part of it as well. You can't pretend to be someone, right? Pretending to be something that you are not, sort of like Ross in that long-running TV series sitcom Friends. When he pretends to be British, all of a sudden he's much more popular than he was before, right? So you can't pretend to be someone that you are not. Because unless you are a sociopath, it's very hard to keep that facade up for a very long time. And unless you're really, really good, most people can kind of spot it eventually. Young kids sense that there's something wrong, uh, because they're still growing and learning. They don't have filters. They don't have that expectation of what is and what is not appropriate behavior. And so they can sort of call a spade when they see it. Also, I was started thinking about other people that I've known in the past because preaching is a lot like that as well. Do you get along with, like, especially if you teach youth group or college students, right? Or even elementary school kids, that kind of relationship. Are you a natural? Are you good at doing it? Do people like you? Or can people just simply not stand you? They can't stand you. One of my kids' friends who took my classes, and I saw him one day, and we were talking, and I told him, yeah, since leaving Temple, I'm teaching at a middle school. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's seems pretty rough because the age group is so different. And then I said, yeah, it's a little bit hard, getting used to it. And he goes, oh, yeah, you got to get them to like you. And it turns out he was student teaching as well. And that must have been one of his things on his mind is to, how do I get the kids to like me? And so I said, "Oh no, no, never do that. Don't try to get the kids to like you." I mean, do you remember substitute teachers when back in the day in your school, right? You walked all over them. You took advantage of them. You totally disrespected them because they tried to get you to like them. And he was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that's right." And so my rule is never be nice, right? I did try to be scary, like when I would walk into the first day of the semester in university, I would pretend to be really, really scary. I wouldn't talk. And in those days, I would hand out the syllabus, right? You would print them out on hard copies. And, this is the first time you're seeing the instructor. Uh, there's not a whole lot of information about him. And so I just quietly hand out, I don't smile. I just don't say a word. I'm handing out the syllabi. Then I go over the syllabi, right? I monotone after I read the whole syllabus, right? Then I knew that I could get at least 8 students per class to drop the class, right? And so basically, I wanted a smaller class so there were fewer papers to grade. But it backfired on me because those 8 students that dropped, well, the spaces were filled right away, except those new students weren't there the day where, I was this mean, scary guy. And so none of them respected me, right? Or none of them got the scary instructor, uh, initial first impression. And so that kind of didn't work. So I said, oh, I have to come up with another method. And so here are some do's and don'ts that I came up with after 39 years of instruction. So maybe you are not interested in teaching, but that's okay because it's kind of like parenting. Or by extension, it's kind of like government. Okay. So here we go. Try, don't. So I'm going to do the don'ts first. Don't try to be their friend. They will see weakness and they will take advantage of you. I mean, think about it. Even your parents, other teachers, if they try to be your friend, that's the clear signal, oh, I can abuse this relationship, right? Because they're trying to be my friend. And so they want, in order to get me to like them, they will do things, make compromises that they may otherwise not make, right? Also, as the state or the government, yeah, they never try to be your friend, right? Although some people try to, like I think the AOCs, they like to pretend that they're your friend. But when the state does it, watch out. There's something shady about it. Anyway, I'm going to stop making the comparisons with parents and government and just focus only on teaching. Don't be nice, right? Don't cut them breaks like, oh, I'm going to do this just for you because I like you. No, you don't do that. Especially don't do that at first. First 90 days, first 100 days of teaching them. Do not do that, right? In other words, once you state the rules, don't bend the rules, all right? At first, okay? As the emphasis is at first, right? Don't be an absolute, right? You got to show some flexibility. Maybe someone had a good reason. Maybe someone has a good explanation, right? And then you work in grace. But initially, what you're going to do is you're going to state a hard line and you're going to make as if it's absolute. You're never going to bend those rules. And so that's the expectation on the part of the students is that, oh, you can't break that rule. And so when they do break the rule and they're horrified, right, that then they're kind of afraid. Yeah. So you kind of want that. And I'll explain why later. Do not play or joke on their level at first, right? So you have to keep that teacher student distance, right? And I know some of you will disagree. This is how I do it, right? So, and then at the end, I'll just make some closing remarks. But this is how I do it according to my personality, what I tolerate, right? I don't joke on their level at first, right? And I don't really understand their jokes anyway, so it's not hard for me to not laugh at their jokes, right? It takes a little while to get their lingo, right? All the insider language, so not a problem. I'm not going to laugh. Don't be an easy A. If you're easy, it's like trying to be their friend, cutting the brakes, bending the rules. They're not going to listen to you. I have some students who study to the test and they know exactly what to do. And so I wonder if they even listen anymore, right? Because once I hand out like what I expect of them, then they tune out. And I'm also hoping that although they tune out, they actually understand what I'm trying to teach them. Next, don't be a hypocrite. I mean, do I even have to say it on this channel? Don't be a hypocrite because, as I always say, hypocrisy is the root of all injustice. Yes, there is justice and injustice in a classroom. They sense the injustice, especially if you show favoritism for a student. You have to call it out, no matter who it is, and also punish equally. So not only for the favorite student, but also for the bad student. You cannot have double standards, right? One for a standard for the students I like and a standard for the students I don't really like that much, right? You can't show that, right? Because once students sense that hypocrisy, yeah, it will not go well. And so whenever they ask me who my favorite student is, I always reply with one of the names of my kids, right? That's my favorite student. Don't be late or unorganized. This puts you at a very, very big disadvantage. You owe them, right? You want your students to have the sense that they owe something to you, but you cannot owe students, right? It's a job. You're in a position. You fulfill your responsibility, period. That's it. Do not try not to be clueless or unable to answer questions, right? So basically, do not go to class unprepared. You should be able to answer pretty much any question they throw at you because it's easy to predict what kind of questions they'll ask. And so you anticipate those questions, make sure you have answers to those questions. You look up those answers, you research those answers, and you have them at the ready when it comes up, right? So don't be unprepared for things like that. And after a while, you'll realize if you do it for some time, you'll notice that all the questions are always the same. So it's only rough in the beginning, but once you know how they're being socialized, then it becomes really easy to predict how they respond or what question they're going to ask once you say a controversial point, right? So that's my list of don'ts. I probably missed a lot. This is my list of do's. Do this, right? Remember. So do remember that your job, your role is to teach. You are the teacher at the end of the day. Parents will not care if you are friendly to their kids if their kids learn nothing, okay? And that kind of came out today where there was a kind of a deadbeat teacher and he was the talk of the town, right? And it didn't matter that students liked him, right? Or they thought he was entertaining. He wasn't doing his job. So that's first and foremost, do your job. Make sure you cross all the T's, dot all the I's, do everything that is expected of you, and a little bit more. And believe me, it goes a long way. Next, do be honest, right? Do make sure that you are honest and fair rather than nice. See, nice can sometimes not be honest. Nice can sometimes not be fair, right? Especially if you're nice to this person, not nice to that person. Yeah, definitely, you are not fair. And that really does affect the way students treat you, right? You want all your students to think that you are fair, you're honest, and you're not drifting into hypocrisy. Right. And so you want to be mindful of hypocrisy or arbitrary rules that work only in favor of certain students or even yourself, only yourself, right? Try not to make up rules on the spot, which are inconsistent with what you have already said, unless you explain and do a mea culpa, right? Say, oh, it's my fault. I was wrong. I am so sorry, right? Apology to your student goes a long way, especially if you are kind of stern like I usually am. I think I am. Then be consistent, right? Instead of being disorganized, be consistent. Try to have a rhythm. You're always on time. You're always going to do this. They know what to expect, right? They're not surprised any longer, right? Right. So being unpredictable as a teacher is not really that great of a trait, right? Be considerate, right? So the door swings both ways. If you are rude and inconsiderate to your students, yeah, they're going to throw it right back at you, right? But also don't be hard just for the sake of being hard, right? If you think that they sense that you're a little bit weak or too soft, don't just yell at them for no reason, right? You don't want that. So you have to be considerate. Have high but reasonable standards. I like to set really, really high standards, but I'm rarely absolute about it, right? Uh, Especially if I catch you doing something you shouldn't be doing, then I cut you a break, right? So see, imagine a month, 2 months, you're really hard line about little trivial things, and then something big comes up, and you're like, okay, let's see what we can do, right? You try to work through it, negotiate some kind of agreement where the student still has a chance to finish the semester, but they realize that they're in trouble, right? When you do that, when you negotiate something like that after being stern, right, they feel like they owe you, right? Oh, wow, wow, he could have done this, but he cut me a break, right? And it sounds dishonest, but if you're in that situation, you realize that's what you would want if you were in that situation. In other words, you take into consideration it wasn't intentional. They're on the learning process, and so showing them a little bit of grace goes a long, long way, right? You're not absolute. It's not that you derive pleasure from punishing people. Also, be mindful of parental treatment of kids. A lot of my students right now are, there's a lot of corporal punishment at home, like they get whooped, right? And not just by their parents' hand, but, there are objects, right, that are used to punish their kids. I don't know how severe is it. They never miss school, right? But when I had a phone call or with one of the parents, and I was trying to be all positive and upbeat, and the problem was that the parent got even more upset, right? Uh, you have a teacher that's going to cut all these breaks for you, and you still don't do well. It was pretty ugly, right? But I was on speakerphone in their house, and so the kid heard that I was trying to, make it go down a little bit easier. And so the next day we had a long conversation, and he actually started to trust me a lot more. Like he realized that I wasn't trying to, sink his future, but that I was trying to do a lot of things for his benefit. And so he was much, much more cooperative after that phone call. You can be funny, right? Be funny sometimes, right? It has to be well timed. You can't do it all the time. Otherwise, they are going to try to make jokes all the time and you'll never learn anything. Next, always acknowledge what they're doing, but also say that, right? So sometimes their behavior is a little bit uncouth, ill-mannered, appropriate for some places, but not in all places. And that's the one thing that I realized about middle school students is that they still don't quite realize that certain behavior is not acceptable in certain situations. Like you can put your feet up on a desk if you're at home, but when you're at school, yeah, it doesn't look right. It looks very funny, especially if someone else is using that desk, right? And so I'll try to be very specific, do this. Otherwise, you're going to embarrass yourself. And I always interject that that's how I learned. I learned the hard way from people pointing out that I was being extremely rude. And so don't do that anymore, right? But that embarrassment it's pretty painful sometimes. Also, explain as much as possible. When you do something and you get that look where they're like, why are we doing this? Explain. 30 seconds is all it takes, right? So do your explanation. They need to understand the purpose and the reason for doing whatever it is that you're doing. So therefore, communication is a priority. I usually can answer emails within a couple of hours, like a couple of hours, unless it's really late at night is all I need to be able to get around to answering an email because I always check my email. I'm kind of obsessive about that. But you always want to communicate promptly in a timely manner, answering all of their questions. That also goes a long way. So basically, just to wrap it up, um, it's the golden rule. You try to practice the golden rule in the classroom, right? Love your neighbor as yourself, right? So that's an anti-hypocrisy teaching, right? Make sure you treat other people the way that you hope to be treated. And you not only avoid hypocrisy, but it shows that you have respect for other people as well. Someone said to me that I don't treat those kids, the middle schoolers, like they're middle school kids. I treat them and I talk to them like they're adults, right? I don't condescend. I don't talk down. I speak like I always do, but I always tell them, but if you don't understand something, just raise your hand. I'll explain it to you. And the reason, and I thought that, okay, they're just really mature kids. And then I was walking by the classroom, the same kids in another class with another teacher, and they're kids again, right? So I thought it was kind of bizarre because in my class, uh, they act a little bit older, uh, But when they go into another class, it's just, yeah, they're back to being middle school students. Now, obviously, all of this is subjective, but if you respect your position, your job, then you teach. That's the priority. You make sure you know your stuff and you teach it in the best way possible. And how much fluff and frill you have with it, like little games and learning games and stuff, well, it's up to you. I can't pull that off. Next, don't abuse your authority. Don't be hypocritical. Be firm but generous, and things kind of work out. And that's like parenting, right? If as long as you're fair, you're not hypocritical, you're firm, was it? You explain what the limits, what the rules are clearly, and you enforce it, right? And you police that line. Well, you'll get respect, right? Because most kids, what they're doing is they're trying to feel out how far they can go without getting in trouble. And so you want to be very clear and consistent. Like if there is a violation, you want to be consistent. So you can't have a punishment that is just so abusive, right? It'll backfire on you. So it has to be reasonable. Everything has to be reasonable. Same as with parenting. And parenting is obviously much, much harder. But nevertheless, parenting does follow similar guidelines. And finally, governing should be like this as well. No hypocrisy, right? And I think a lot of people go wrong when they try to be friendly. Yeah, that's like blood in the water for sharks. You don't want to do that, right? Just be fair. Do fulfill your role. And once you fulfill all of the things that are expected of you, it doesn't matter how hardcore tough you are later on when you crack a joke or when you do something, it changes the way people see you. Oh, look, they're a human being after all, that kind of thing. And you find that you get a lot closer to students. There's a lot of mutual respect. And that is how you become a respected teacher or a respected parent or a respected government official. That's it for this episode. I will talk to you next time.